Are you really in control, or is your ego simply running the show? If you are reacting instead of creating, it's time you master your ego before it masters you. My name is Peter Abundant, aka Dr. Abundant, PhD, and ordained minister of metaphysical sciences, which is the study of spirituality. I am also the author of The Enlightened Shadow and Spiritual, Not Religious, which is available both on Amazon and Audible. On this spiritual journey, the ego is a big topic of discussion. Why? Well, the ego does have a lot to do with the suffering that we experience. The ego has a lot to do with the chaos that we can see and observe within the world, even within ourselves. But what I want you to understand is that really the ego is not the enemy. The reason why the ego is causing so much trouble is because you're failing to manage your ego. Now, the ego, it isn't evil, but what the ego is, it is in fact your identity's security system. You see, the ego has a big part to do with your identity. And going beyond just simply the identity of your name, your gender, right? Maybe where you grew up, it goes into identity as it relates to you versus me, right? You as a separation of the universe. Now, the thing is, we know on the spiritual level, that is all an illusion. But if you're not consciously on this spiritual journey, that illusion seems quite real. And one of the things that tends to take us away from the spiritual experiences that we're meant to have is the fact that we identify so much with what the ego is saying to us, right? The experience of the ego. We even think that we are our ego, but the ego is just an expression. The ego is just a way of essentially keeping you mindful about your experience here in this physical realm called Earth. Now, when you let the ego lead you, you stay stuck in a state of fear, doubt, in a state of overreaction, because the ego's nature is to really protect you from physical harm, so to speak, even emotional harm, even spiritual harm. It all depends on the level and the degree by which you identify with your ego. So, yes, the ego can be looked at as the problem, but it really isn't. It is only a problem because you haven't mastered your ego. You haven't come to the awareness of observing your ego, of even recognizing your ego as something that is separate from whom you truly are. Whom you truly are is consciousness, awareness, the pure essence of the divine spark, right? Which we often call God. Some of us call it the universe. Some of us call it source. But essentially, the purity of who you are is the essence of your ability to observe, to be aware of, to even require or demand particular experiences, because essentially that's what we're here to do. You chose to come here to have a particular experience. That experience is to be you and to actually move forward along this life while you are unraveling, while you are coming into a self-realization that you are also the creator of your universe. So there is you, the core essence of who you are, pure consciousness, and then there is the nature of your consciousness, which is to create. Now, because you are still an individual, right? You are individual spark of the divine essence we often call God. Then you get to create whatever you desire. Usually that is something that resonates with you as an individual. So for some people, it can be to live a life where they travel the entire world, right? Some people, it's to be isolated and live on a mountain, right? To live off grid. Some people, it may be to be a multi-billionaire, right? And living all the lavish lifestyle that you can possibly live and experience. Some people, it can be simply existing amongst other people and being in the moment and enjoying life. So you have to come into a clarity as to what your consciousness desires to experience. That looks like you simply following your curiosity, but particularly your passions, your talents, and your desires. The things that you think about often is usually the path by which you will actually achieve a state of enlightenment or a spiritual awakening. The ego, though, will try to unintentionally prevent you from doing those things because the ego wants to protect you from harm. And the easiest way, to be honest, to not experience harm is to not do a damn thing, right? Just sit in a space where you are not taking any risks and you are not putting yourself out there. And so if you are being led by the ego, that essentially is what your life looks like. It looks like you being isolated in a bubble of familiarity and being comfortable while being uncomfortable. It looks like you just simply having these ideas, these desires, these passions, but not taking the initiative and not following through with making them happen. Because your ego is scared. The ego is a expression of you that is grounded in fear. It is grounded in doubt, right? It is grounded in reaction. It is grounded in the thinking that something is going to hurt you because we are physical beings. And in this physical body, the physical body itself can get hurt. And so because we are identifying with that part of us, then we think it extends itself out to everything that we do, and it doesn't. The reality is you are infinite being. You cannot be hurt. You cannot be harmed. You cannot die. The body dies. The body transforms, but you ascend and you go to another space, another realm. And so you have to understand that your ego is really an expression of the physical experience, the human experience. This is why every single human has an ego. Now, you know your ego's in control of you when you always feel the need to be right when you're having a debate or an argument. You know, you never can admit that, oh, you know what? I was wrong. You're not looking to understand somebody. You are just looking to win. You're looking to beat them in an argument or a discussion. All right. When your ego is in control, you often take things personal. You don't identify that people are saying things, that they are projecting things from their own reality and their own state of awareness. And you take that on as if that is something directed towards you, as if it is your problem, when it isn't. Recognize that though, yes, we are all reflections of each other. And so when you take something personal, right, that somebody has said or did, it is because there is a disconnection between recognizing that you are in control of your reality, not them. So when you take things personal, that means that there is a part of you that believes, and that part of you is the ego, that believes that they are actually in control of you. And because you believe it, then it makes it true. So you have to understand that when you take things personal a lot, that is because you're in your ego. You're definitely not in your consciousness. You're not being led by consciousness. Okay. When you are controlled by the ego, you also feel triggered or judged pretty often. It lends itself to piggybacking on taking things personal. Okay. When somebody says something, does something, you get immediately triggered. Or when somebody critiques you, right? They may even make a suggestion. They may even offer you help and support. You may take that as judgment, as if you're not good enough, as if you're not smart enough, as if you're not capable, when that isn't the case. You are making an assumption based on the ego's inability to really just acknowledge that they are simply being themselves and living their life the best way they see fit, just like you are. And so when you are coming from consciousness, you understand that reality. And therefore, you're not going to be triggered as much. Okay. You're definitely not going to feel judged. Even when somebody is judging you, you won't feel judged. That's how much freedom comes with spiritual awakening and really recognizing that you are consciousness, not the ego. Now, another thing, when you are controlled by the ego, you experience is you struggle with letting go of things. You hold on to things. You may hold on to, the idea of somebody hurting you, some past trauma. You may hold on to that. You may feel like, revenge. You may feel a sense of wanting to get back at a person or not even acknowledge a person. You may feel like you want to, have a sense of power over them. And that lends itself to, again, the ego leading you into thinking that there is a true power dynamic between two individuals when there really isn't. The power dynamic happens when the ego is only involved, because the ego is the only thing that acknowledges this idea that somebody else can win over you or you can win over them. When you're led by consciousness, though, you recognize that you are the one in control over your life, your experiences, and you. Even when somebody else is doing something from a place of their own individuality, and it may impede on your personal space, your life, what have you, when you're led by consciousness, an amazing thing happens where you recognize the ability to not be reactive, but to really align yourself with a way of being, responding to a person, an experience, a place, a situation, in the way that lends itself to grace, right? To compassion, even empathy, but most importantly, a sense of strength, a sense of regalness, a sense of stoicism, where you really see them as a person who is just going through maybe a lot of pain and suffering, and that doesn't need to be your problem, even though they are intentionally trying to make it your problem. So you figure out ways to maneuver around them in alignment with the peace and the joy that you are only focused on in your life. So think about a time where you snapped, where you shut down, where you even got defensive. Okay. That wasn't your higher self. That was your ego just trying to protect your pain. It was trying to create a space where maybe more pain wasn't added to it. But the irony is, when you focus on something in our universe, you bring more light, you bring more power to it, you bring more energy to it. So if you're trying to avoid pain or protect pain because you're focusing on pain, you are going to create more pain. But if you are coming from the place of the ego and you're understanding that, hey, if I look at this situation from a place of love, because that is what consciousness is, when you're coming from consciousness rather than the ego, you are approaching things from a place of love, because that is at the core who you are. What you are is love. And so that allows itself to let you experience more love. And that manifests in infinite things, whether it be better relationships, whether it be better health, fitness, whether it be financial success. But when you are stuck in being led by the ego and you haven't managed your ego, then the ego is going to continue to perpetuate this idea of pain. And whatever it is that you focus on, you will continue to feed and it will continue to grow. So what I want to do is I want to give you some tools to help you to master your ego, to manage your ego. So that way, when things come up, you learn how to adjust. You learn how to adapt. You learn how to make the ego work for you, not against you. Understand that the ego has a purpose. And when you recognize what that purpose is, then you can align the ego with everything that you desire. And therefore, the ego doesn't try to stop you out of fear. It encourages you. It encourages you out of fear. Fear sounds like a negative word, but when you're mindful about the things that your ego brings up and you're intentional and you're aware, you can use those things to your benefit. Okay. And once you learn how to use those things to your benefit, then those things don't become as palpable, right? Fear, when you learn how to use it and you say, you know what, I fear these things. So let me understand that if I not pursue this business, then my fear of being broke or dependent on somebody else, okay, will continue to grow. And so, though I am scared and I have some insecurities and self-doubt about my ability to grow my own business, that is the best option. And so the fear is now one of propelling you, pushing you forward toward growing your business rather than keeping you stagnated and stuck. If you desire to have an amazing and beautiful relationship, but you fear to go out into the dating scene, you have to figure out a way to maneuver and change those things around. So that way the fear is one of recognizing that companionship, connection with others, romance, love, intimacy is very important to you. Also recognizing the importance of having standards, making sure that if an individual loves you, respects you, then you can allow them to experience you in that way. You see? So the fear of not having great relationships will beat the fear of jumping into, right, the dating scene again. Okay. So this example is a simple one, is dealing with triggers. Now, the interesting thing is triggers come about and they come out of nowhere. At least it seems that way. But there's a way where you can actually recognize a trigger when it happens. And instead of responding, you can actually react, or you can actually create a space where you see it, you acknowledge it, and before you react, you can actually respond accordingly. Okay. So your triggers show you exactly where your ego is hiding. So you have to be mindful about that. If your trigger is, say, finances, all right, when money gets tight, maybe you get more agitated, more frustrated, more pissed off. Your buttons are easily pressed. Well, that's where your ego is. Your ego is in identifying money with personal value. Okay. Now, if triggers as far as relationships come up, then you have to look at, okay, my ego is in maybe not feeling loved, not feeling worthy of love, not feeling like you're capable to love or be loved. And so you have to acknowledge where the ego sits. Health, maybe you're overweight, you tried multiple diets, but nothing is working, right? Something hasn't hit yet. You have to recognize, okay, your ego is hiding when it comes to weight, when it comes to maybe protection, because weight can often be a manifestation of not feeling protected. Maybe there was some trauma that happened to you when you were a child, and therefore you need to build a shield around you. So you have to be mindful about that. You have to dig deep into it. You see? So when something upsets you, this is what you do. You pause before reacting. Now, the pausing part takes some time to get used to. What you really want to do is you want to get into pausing before any kind of responding or reacting. When something happens, let yourself have space. Allow yourself a pause. Sometimes we just want to be quick. We want to be quick. We want to just react, be quick, be funny, be, charismatic and all those things. Let that go. Pause. Think things through. Be mindful. Allow for the mindfulness to actually filter out everything that you're trying to say, that you want to communicate, that you want to express. Okay? So create a moment of pause before reacting to particularly a trigger. All right? Now what you're going to do is you're going to breathe. And then what you're going to do is you're going to name what you feel. Just name it. Anger, frustration, embarrassment, annoyance, insecurity, right? You're going to name it. Now, when you name something, believe it or not, you begin to take away its power. When it has no name, it has no capsule. Think of the name as a capsule, something to hold and keep. Think of it as a net, right? A cage even. When it doesn't have a name, then it is massive. It is explosive. It is all over the place. Okay? It is chaotic. Once you name something, then you create a box for it. Then it is confined in one space. So after you name it, then you're going to ask yourself, does this fit in one or two places? Is this fear or is this love? Okay. Now, chances are, if it's a trigger, it's falling into the category of fear. And this is important because you don't want to judge it. You don't want to feel shame about it. You don't want to be embarrassed about it. It is part of the process. And that's all you want to do is you just want to ask yourself, okay, is this grounded in love or is this grounded in fear? And most times love is grounded in something that is real, whereas fear is usually an illusion. It is usually based on imagination. Okay. Fear obviously comes from the ego, whereas love comes from consciousness. Every trigger is a chance to practice awareness. And this is what this practice is about. It's about practicing awareness, not reaction. And that's a very simple thing to do, is to practice being aware. When you are aware, then again, it gives you the ability to manage, to control, to have mastery over self. Okay. So now the next thing is you want to align with your higher self. This is the aspect where you actually really understand the significance of focusing on that which you desire rather than focusing on what you don't want. So though we want to acknowledge the ego, we want to put it in its place. The topic of this is the ego, but truly we want to put a lot of our focus on consciousness, because the thing, again, that you focus on is the thing that you are going to strengthen. So consciousness, your higher self, that is the focal point. We are, yes, acknowledging the ego, but it is consciousness that we are desiring to be led by. Okay. Your ego reacts, but your higher self, your consciousness responds. Reacting is a sense of no power, no control, really. It is the absence of controlling your power. But when you are responding and you're responsive coming from your consciousness, then it is the intentional, the productive intention, focus, use of your power. You see the difference? So you step in alignment by doing three things. Okay. One of those things is breathing deeply, breathing slowly. Okay. That always will calm you down. That will always calm you down. Deep and slow breathing will always begin the process of just allowing you to really align with yourself. Breath is life. Breath is love. I mean, really, it is. So when you get into intentional breathing, slow breathing, not fast breathing, because that creates a different space. Fast breathing is usually identified again with the ego, because when you're in fear, okay, when you are triggered, when you're anxious, what are you doing? You breathe fast, right? But when you are calm, right, when you're in a space of love, beauty, peace, you're breathing slowly, deeply, intentionally. You see, now you have to breathe, right? And that's why it's important to identify, okay, if this is something that you have to do, then the slow version of that represents peace, tranquility. The fast, rapid version of that, fear, right? Anxiety, ego. So another thing you want to do, repeat affirmations. Affirmations are very important. Statements, mottos, mantras. Okay. I am safe to be seen. I chose peace. I chose peace. So be mindful and intentional about what it is you're claiming to experience at this moment. State it as if you are already experiencing it. Breathe deeply, slowly, because you are already experiencing that peace, right? Stop taking things personally. And when I say things, I mean everything. If it is not generated from within you directly, then it has nothing to do with you. You see, everything that every person and everything that you're seeing in the universe is not something that you need to take on. Now, yes, to a degree, you look at it and you observe it and see it as a reflection of as what's going on the inside. But don't see it as the outside of the universe trying to judge you, punish you, shame you, hurt you. That's impossible. Anything that you experience from the universe outside of your physical body that appears to be harmful, that appears to be, to create a space where you are uneasy and uncomfortable and anxious and angry, that is because there is an idea, there's a belief system going on within you that is causing you to see the world and translate the world that way, to interpret the world that way. But it isn't actually that way. So when somebody is saying something, doing something, recognize that that has nothing to do with you. That's their stuff. So when you are triggered or when you take it personally, you literally are taking on their stuff as yours. And you will never have control over that because you have no control over them. But what you do have control over is your perspective, is your understanding, your reality, how you see the world and the universe around you. So be mindful about that. When you stop chasing control over everything and everyone and recognize that you are the creator of what it is you are experiencing, you start flowing with power. You start to understand that you are power, but you're not controlling other people's process and other people's expression and other people's journey. You see? Now, the last thing that I want to share with you as far as mastering your ego is to try this quick, ego release exercise. What I want you to do is I want you to think of a recent moment where your ego just took over, meaning you had a trigger, you reacted, you were, just out of your rational state of being, and you just exploded and just responded, reacted. You just went crazy, right? Crazy to your standards, right? Now, what I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes, breathe, and repeat that moment. So think of a time where your ego just took over. Okay. Close your eyes, take a nice deep breath in and out, slow, and then replay that moment in your mind. Now, what I want you to do is imagine your higher self responding with love instead of your ego responding with fear. So I'm going to repeat it again. You're going to think about a recent moment where your ego took over. Okay. You're going to close your eyes, breathe, and repeat that moment in your mind. But this time, you're going to imagine your higher self responding to that moment with love instead of your ego responding with fear. And then I want you to finally do is say out loud, I chose peace over control. I chose peace over control. And I want you to do this every day because the ego, it shows up every day. It's not something that you're going to never experience. It's not something that you're going to say, oh, I've experienced my ego only once this week, or I've only experienced my ego only once this month. The ego shows up. That's part of who you are in the layers of self. And so what I want you to do is get into the ego as far as recognizing and observing when it shows up. Now, when you do that, that's how you begin to get mastery over it. But always come to a space of recognizing that your primary focus is consciousness. Your primary focus is recognizing that you are consciousness and not the ego. Okay? So observe the ego as it shows up with the intention of allowing it to anchor you in the understanding that you are pure consciousness. All right. So when you do these exercises every day, you'll feel lighter, you will feel clearer. All right. And the more in command of your energy, you have a true sense of personal, spiritual control. Now, last thing, I want you to ask yourself, what does your ego, right? Or where does your ego show up? Where does it show up the most? Does it show up in your relationships? Does it show up in work? Does it show up on social media? Right? Does it show up when you look in the mirror? Does it show up when it comes to, going on dates? Does it show up with your children? Be mindful about where it shows up the most for you. And remember, give it a name. When you do that, you put it in a container. You can identify it. You can deal with it better once you do that. So understand that you are not the ego. You are consciousness. When you understand that you are consciousness, that is ultimately where you begin to take mastery over the ego. Thank you so much. Feel free to go to drabundant.com, subscribe to my daily newsletter, and of course, get access to this free ebook, The Power Within. Continue to join me on this journey. Peace and abundance always.